The Aurora Theater Incident 2012 is 100% US-based history. It was just after midnight on July 20, 2012 in Aurora, Colorado. Inside the Century 16 movie theater, the lights dimmed and the crowd buzzed with excitement. Hundreds of people had packed into Theater 9 to watch The Dark Knight Rises, one of the most anticipated movies of the year. Some fans wore Batman shirts, others brought popcorn and sodas the size of their arms. Everyone was ready for a night of fun and laughter. But only minutes into the movie, everything changed. The sound of gunfire cut through the air, loud, sharp, and terrifying. At first, many thought it was part of the movie's sound effects. After all, the film was full of explosions and chaos. But when smoke filled the air and screams echoed across the room, people realized this was not a movie anymore. Panic spread like wildfire. People ducked under seats, others tried to run, but the aisles were narrow and the theater was dark. Someone shouted, "Get down!" Another voice screamed, "Call 911!" The smell of smoke and gunpowder made it hard to breathe. Cell phones lit up as people tried to text their families, whispering prayers and holding their loved ones tight. Outside, police radios exploded with reports. Officers rushed toward the scene, not yet knowing the scale of what they were about to face. Within minutes, ambulances, fire trucks, and dozens of patrol cars surrounded the theater complex. Red and blue lights painted the night sky as medics scrambled to treat the wounded. Inside the theater, chaos turned to horror. Many lay injured, some unable to move. Others helped strangers they had never met before, pulling them toward the exits. Shoes, popcorn boxes, and torn ticket stubs covered the floor. The once happy crowd was now caught in one of the darkest moments in modern US history. As the minutes passed, the scene grew silent, except for the cries of those asking for help. Then came the voices of police officers shouting, "Hands up! We're here to help!" One officer described later that it looked like a war zone. Broken seats, bullet holes, and smoke made it almost impossible to see clearly. Outside the theater, the suspect was found standing near his car, calm and quiet. He didn't run, he didn't resist. He simply told the officers his name and that his car was booby-trapped. The officers looked at each other in disbelief. What did he mean by that? Within minutes, the Aurora Police Department realized they weren't just dealing with a single crime scene. His apartment, just a few miles away, was filled with explosives and traps designed to cause even more destruction. Bomb squads and the FBI were called in. The neighborhood had to be evacuated. Meanwhile, back at the theater, families waited outside in tears, desperate to know if their loved ones were safe. Reporters began arriving, their cameras capturing the flashing lights and chaos that surrounded the building. The once joyful premiere had turned into breaking news, a national tragedy unfolding live on American soil. By sunrise, the world knew what had happened. 12 people had lost their lives and 70 others were injured, some critically. Hospitals across Aurora were overwhelmed, doctors and nurses working through exhaustion to save as many as possible. And as investigators began piecing together the night's events, one chilling question spread across the nation. Why did he do it?
That question echoed from homes, schools, and TV screens everywhere. Who was the man behind the mask that entered the theater that night? What drove him to turn a place of joy into a scene of horror? As the answers slowly began to emerge, the story of the Aurora Theater Incident would shake America to its core. Not just because of the tragedy, but because of what it revealed about the human mind and how darkness can sometimes hide in plain sight. And just when everyone thought the nightmare was over, investigators made a discovery inside his apartment that changed everything. When officers arrived at the suspect's apartment in Aurora later that morning, they had no idea what they were walking into. The young man who told them his home was booby-trapped wasn't bluffing. The sun had barely risen when the Aurora Police Department and FBI bomb squads surrounded a small, quiet apartment complex on Paris Street. Neighbors stood outside in shock, watching as robots, wires, and armored officers filled the parking lot. The area looked like something from a movie, except this was real. Every move had to be slow, careful, and precise. Through the window, investigators could see tripwires, bottles filled with liquid chemicals, and homemade explosives. There were also dozens of bullets, gas canisters, and jars filled with strange materials that looked like something out of a science lab. One wrong move, and the entire building could have exploded. The suspect had planned it so that if anyone opened the door, it would trigger an explosion that could destroy the whole complex. Experts said later that it could have caused massive destruction, killing everyone inside and nearby. For hours, the FBI worked to safely disable the traps. Robots were sent in, and bomb experts took turns cutting wires and removing dangerous chemicals. It took 2 full days to clear the apartment. When they were done, officials announced that the neighborhood was safe again. But what they found inside told a chilling story of preparation and intent. Inside the apartment, there were notebooks filled with plans, sketches, and disturbing thoughts. Investigators said it looked like he had been planning the theater attack for months. He studied the building layout, timing, and even how people might react. It wasn't random, it was calculated. Meanwhile, across Aurora and the entire United States, people tried to make sense of what had happened. The victims' photos began to appear on TV screens and newspapers. Smiling faces, college students, parents, young professionals, all gone or injured in one night of terror. Vigils were held across Colorado. Thousands gathered, holding candles and praying together in silence. At the Aurora Municipal Center, President Obama arrived to meet with families of the victims. His voice was calm, but heavy with emotion. Even in our darkest moments, we find strength in the love and compassion of others. His words comforted some, but for many, the pain was too deep. Back at the police station, investigators questioned the suspect, trying to understand why he did it. His name was James Holmes, a 24-year-old former neuroscience student. People were shocked. How could someone so young and intelligent commit something so terrible? Those who knew him described him as quiet, sometimes distant, but never violent. He had no criminal record, no known enemies. But as investigators dug deeper, they found signs of mental struggles. He had written about hearing voices, about losing touch with reality, and about wanting to become something more. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't show anger or fear. He just sat there, silent. When asked why he attacked innocent people, he didn't give a clear answer. It was as if he had already disconnected from the world around him. As the investigation continued, one officer described the moment that stuck with him the most. When we looked at his apartment and saw how much work he put into planning, it made us realize he wanted to cause chaos on a massive scale. What stopped him was luck and timing. Over the following weeks, Aurora began to heal slowly. The theater was closed for months. Flowers, letters, and teddy bears covered the entrance. People from across the nation sent messages of love and support.
But inside courtrooms, the case was only beginning. Prosecutors gathered thousands of pieces of evidence. Defense lawyers prepared to argue that James Holmes was mentally ill and not fully aware of his actions. The courtroom became a place of emotion. Families of victims sat just a few feet away from the man who changed their lives forever. The media called it the Aurora Theater case. Reporters from around the world filled the seats every day, broadcasting every detail. The story wasn't just about the attack anymore. It was about justice, responsibility, and the search for answers in a tragedy that made no sense. Still, one haunting thought stayed with everyone. If the bomb in his apartment had gone off, the tragedy could have been far worse.
Hundreds more could have died. As the trial drew closer, one question remained unanswered. What would the court decide? Would Holmes be found guilty of the crime, or would he be declared insane? The families waited, day after day, for the truth and for closure. But the truth was complicated, and what happened next in that courtroom would shock the entire nation once again. And just when the verdict seemed certain, an emotional turn inside the courtroom left everyone silent, including the judge. The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and the families of victims sat together, holding each other tightly. After years of investigation, months of preparation, and endless media coverage, it was finally time for the trial of James Holmes, the man behind the Aurora Theater Incident. From the moment the trial began, the atmosphere was tense. Every detail of that night, the gunfire, the screams, the chaos inside Theater 9, was played out again through witness testimonies and police reports. Survivors recounted how they had crawled over injured friends to escape, how smoke and blood made it nearly impossible to see, and how strangers became heroes by helping one another. The prosecution presented evidence piece by piece: the firearms, the bullets, the homemade explosives in Holmes's apartment, and his detailed notebooks showing how meticulously he had planned the attack. Every photo, every document, and every recording reinforced the chilling reality. This was no impulsive act. It had been calculated. The defense argued that Holmes wasn't in his right mind during the attack. They showed psychologist reports and interviews that indicated severe mental illness. They claimed he had been detached from reality, suffering from hallucinations and delusions. According to them, he wasn't fully aware of the consequences of his actions. For the families of victims, these arguments felt like a cruel puzzle. Could someone truly be so detached from reality that they could walk into a theater full of people and open fire without knowing the damage it would cause? The courtroom was heavy with emotion. Tears ran freely, and some families clutched letters, photos, and mementos of those they had lost. Outside the courtroom, news anchors broadcast updates live, and social media exploded with commentary. The entire nation was following every development, wondering what the verdict would reveal about justice in the aftermath of such a tragedy. As the trial entered its final weeks, one shocking detail emerged. Holmes had prepared escape plans and hidden tunnels in his apartment, but they had been discovered before he could act. Investigators revealed that if not for quick police response, hundreds more could have been killed. That revelation stunned the public and highlighted just how close the tragedy came to becoming even worse.
Finally, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived: the jury deliberation. The families of victims sat in the courtroom, holding their breath as the jury disappeared behind closed doors. Hours passed, then days. Every family member replayed that night in their minds, hoping that the court would provide justice, yet fearing the outcome. When the jury returned, the room fell silent. The foreperson stood, holding the slip of paper that would decide Holmes's fate. The words seemed to hang in the air, almost too heavy to speak. "Guilty on all counts," the foreperson announced. A mix of relief, sorrow, and disbelief washed over the courtroom. Justice, in some form, had been served, but the pain and loss would never fully disappear. Families hugged tightly, some sobbing openly, while others stared blankly, trying to process years of grief finally met with a legal conclusion. Holmes himself remained mostly silent, expressionless as the verdict was read. His lawyers began motions for appeal, but the outcome was clear. The Aurora Theater Incident had left an indelible mark on the nation, and accountability had been established. In the years that followed, the tragedy inspired nationwide discussions about mental health, public safety, and emergency preparedness. Movie theaters changed security policies, and communities held vigils each year to remember the victims. Their stories of bravery, compassion, and survival were shared widely to ensure that the horror of that night would never be forgotten. Even today, the memory of July 20th, 2012 remains vivid. The Aurora Theater Incident is not just a case study in tragedy, it is a lesson in humanity, in the fragility of life, and in the strength of people who refuse to give up even in the darkest moments. The legacy of that night continues to echo through Aurora and across the United States, a stark reminder that safety, vigilance, and community matter more than ever. Even after the trial, the shadow of July 20th, 2012 lingered over Aurora, Colorado. The city had survived a tragedy that could have been far worse, but the scars, both visible and invisible, remained. Families who had lost loved ones struggled to rebuild their lives. Survivors carried memories that would never fade, the screams, the chaos, and the moments of heroism that saved lives. In the months following the verdict, investigators and experts continued to study what happened. They wanted to understand not just the actions of James Holmes, but the warning signs, the preparation, and the failures that allowed such a carefully planned attack to occur. Mental health specialists emphasized the importance of early intervention, community awareness, and accessible treatment to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Memorials were erected outside the Century 16 Theater. Each plaque bore the names of those who had died, a reminder of the lives taken too soon. Flowers, candles, and letters continued to appear, left by strangers who wanted to honor the victims. Schools and local organizations held annual remembrance events, ensuring that the courage and compassion displayed that night were never forgotten. The survivor stories became lessons in resilience. Some returned to their everyday lives, driven to advocate for stronger safety measures and better mental health support. Others told their stories in interviews, documentaries, and books, sharing the realities of what it means to face unimaginable terror and still find the strength to move forward. Aurora itself changed. Security measures in public spaces improved, and theaters around the country reviewed emergency protocols. Communities across the United States began conversations about safety, awareness, and responsibility. Conversations that continue to this day.
Yet despite the planning, the fear, and the devastation, one enduring truth remained. Even in moments of darkness, ordinary people performed extraordinary acts of courage. Strangers helped strangers. Heroes emerged quietly in the chaos, and the human spirit refused to be broken. The Aurora Theater Incident is now part of U.S. history, a story of tragedy, bravery, and the consequences of actions that ripple far beyond a single night. It serves as both a warning and a reminder that life is fragile, safety is essential, and communities are strongest when they come together in the face of fear. As the city remembers the lives lost and the lessons learned, the story stands as a lasting testament to resilience, compassion, and the ongoing effort to protect and care for one another. The Aurora Theater Incident may have begun as a night of horror, but it ended as a story of courage, remembrance, and hope. A story that continues to shape Aurora and the United States even today. As we look back on the Aurora Theater Incident, it's clear that tragedy can strike anywhere, even in the places we feel safest. But amidst the fear and chaos, there were moments of courage, compassion, and humanity that remind us of the strength people can show in the darkest times. The story of that night isn't just about what was lost, it's about how communities respond, how heroes emerge, and how memories are honored. Every candle, every tribute, and every survivor's story keeps the lessons alive. If there's one thing to take away, it's this: vigilance, empathy, and unity matter more than ever. And though the events of July 2012 will never be forgotten, the courage of those who survived and those who helped continues to inspire. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated on more real-life American crime stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines.